next speaker has already been introduced. This was at the beginning of yesterday's session. Yes, and the next speaker is standing here. I am from Iceland. I am a journalist, former journalist, historian, trade unionist, and politician. And I became 70 years old this summer. And I had a birthday seminar, and the title of the seminar was, "Do we need to reinvent society?" If I had suggested this title 30 years ago, nobody would have understood what I meant. But now everybody understands what I mean. And now I'm extending this title and asking, do we need to reinvent society locally and globally? And I promise you to try to be very short. I'm not going to give a big speech. I did that this summer. But my thesis is that there is a danger that society is coming apart. This is happening in many ways and due to many reasons. For instance, by privatization, collective care and the social responsibility is being transferred from society to the individual. The patient is becoming a consumer, a customer, and the same is happening in our school system. The students becoming consumers, customers. Everything is being turned over to business. And there are also signs that the institutional world is drifting apart from grassroots politics. Now, I was saying yesterday in one of the introductions or in a question I posed about the use of words, phrases, populism. And I was referring back to ancient history in Rome. The patricians, the elite, and you had the plebeians, the plebs. Plebiscite, popular. The very expression of democracy is now being degraded. You referred to Roosevelt's time. In the time of Roosevelt, populism was spoken well of. It was associated with working class achievement. It was not a derogatory term at all. And Brexit, it's spoken of as a disease. When I say in respected circles, political circles in Europe, that I would have voted Brexit, pro-Brexit, there is silence, a condemning silence. I am not in line with Boris Johnson or Nigel Farage. I'm in line with Ögmundur Jónasson, who has as a trade unionist and an activist been fighting centralized market dictates from Brussels. And I've been fighting for transparency in the international trade agreements, GATS, which turned over to become TISA, the rich nations of the world, against the poor. CETA, TTIPs. And suddenly I was at one with Donald Trump, with his protectionism. Excuse me, President. But sometimes protectionism is protecting the community and the will of the people. So let us be careful when we generalize. Because what I fear is happening, that instead of the dictatorship of Moscow, we are getting a dictatorship of the market. People ask, what is allowed to be done in our country? Are we disturbing the market principles? And if we do, we are taken to court in Brussels, in the European Union. And it is this. Some people who are skeptical of the development in the European Union are voting against it. And this is something we must analyze and ask ourselves and others and stimulate a discussion. We have come a very, very long way from the 1940s, where we had the Beveridge Commission in Britain. You remember the title of that, or the heading? From the Cradle to the Grave. Society should take care of us, and we all together, from the cradle to the grave. Along comes Margaret Thatcher, who tells us that there is no such thing as society. Quote, there is no such thing as society. Only individuals, competing individuals. And, she added, greed is good. 40 years earlier, it would have been said in a different race. It would have been wrapped, put in better wrappings, such as the pursuance of self-interest is for the benefit of all. You need no such wrappings anymore. You just say, greed is good. And when she was asked what was her biggest achievement in her political career, she answered, Tony Blair. Short answer. New Labour. She was saying that she had convinced her opponents. And while the neoconservatives, listening to Hayek, Friedman, Buchanan, we had them all in Iceland. I was a journalist at the time. I had interviews with them and made programs. They were seeking their ideological roots, while the left, the social democratic left, abandoned theirs. And I want to quote a German economist, Wolfgang Streeck, who said in an interview which was published in The Guardian, the British newspaper Guardian, some time ago, that capitalism was broken, and more specifically he said, and I want to quote him directly, since this is relevant to my argumentation, modern capitalism has relied on its enemies to wade in with the lifebelt of reform. During the Great Depression of the 30s, it was Roosevelt's Democrats who rolled out the New Deal, while Britain's Unionists allied with Keynes. Compare that with now. Over 40 years, neoliberal capitalism has destroyed its opposition. Progress is something my generation has believed in. I'm born in 1948. We thought everything was for the better. And we thought that even in spite of wars, calamities, famines, we were progressing. And we believed in a given stability. And the stability was given to these competing political economic forces of right, left, which looked after each other in a way. This is gone. And instead of having this belief in progress, we have uncertainty and fear of the future. And he or she who appears to be able to remove that fear is the political winner of the day. And this is the opportunists. I don't call them populists, I call them opportunists. And I want to call the opportunists, if they are of such leanings, fascists, racists, call spade a spade, and meet them on such grounds. Donald Trump said, I think it was last week, that he could promise the American nation good weather in the future. He didn't say climate, good weather. And no problems in the forests in the future, if you only elect me. Now, I said I would be short, and I'm going to stick to that. But I am going to end on a positive note. What we have to do and what we need to do to reinvent society, the values of society. I want to look at it macro and micro. First, micro. Iceland, the year 1995, 1998. Among young people, drinking and the use of cannabis was on the rise. A tradition was developing where people would gather in central Reykjavik, our capital, in thousands, drink and have a good time. It was getting very, very unruly. According to statistics, just under 40% of 16-year-olds were drinking quite heavily. According to the statistical surveys, 36% of 16-year-olds had drunk heavily during the last 30 days. Smoking was also on the rise. 32% of 16-year-olds were smoking heavily or regularly. And nobody knew what to do. Things were getting out of control. This was not out of line with what was happening in other parts of Europe, similar. But we had, in addition, this social monster we saw in central Reykjavik every weekend. And the police, nobody could do anything about it until a group of parents decided to set their heels down. And they, under the slogan, "Let us talk together," had suggestions. They allied with municipalities, sports federations, church or religious bodies, the whole spectrum. And they, amongst the things they suggested, was that parents should take more care of their children. They should be together with their children. Try to be together with your children over the weekend. Some people would laugh at this. Wait a minute, aren't we in the 21st century? Helgi, protection. Well, this is what they wanted to do. Protect their children. And as unbelievable as it might sound, they had success. According to a survey from the year 2000, 36% of young people, 16-year-olds, were with their parents over weekends. 36%. In 2017, 63%. Just because of this campaign. And what happened? Drinking went down from 36% to 6%. Smoking from 32% to 8%. Success. Society was being reinvented. We were taking care of each other as families. Taking care, not asking the police to arrest anybody, no. We were just changing the values, the norms, the habits. And this was out of line with what has happened in most other places. This is an interesting exercise in cultural diplomacy, in becoming a society. The second example, the last example, I only have two, is what happened in Marrakesh, in Morocco last week. I was there. I was moderating some side events for the international trade unions, on the public side, PSI, Public Services Union. And there a historical, I think, document was agreed to. It's the International Compact on Migration. It was a very sad thing that some nations run away from this. The United States, Hungary, Poland, Czech Republic, Switzerland, Australia, and many or several others. Why? They didn't want to have anything to do with this. But what is this? I urge everybody to read this. This document is a working document with 23 objectives. And the objectives, well, I will read 2 or 3, not the 23. Objective 1, collect and utilize accurate and disaggregated data, aggregated data as a basis for evidence-based policies. Let's know what we are talking about. Let's get the facts on the table. Number 2, minimize the adverse drivers and structural factors that compel people to leave their country of origin. Is that bad? Is it bad to sit down and discuss this and find ways? Objective 6, facilitate fair and ethical recruitment and safeguard conditions that ensure decent work. Is this bad? Is this something to run away from? Isn't this a problem we have to discuss? The migration, forced and unforced, of health workers from the Philippines to Europe, from Sudan to Saudi Arabia. There are 300 recruitment agencies in Sudan for the Persian Gulf, emptying the country of health workers. Are we going to discuss this for the benefit of countries of origin, for the people who are working in this field, and for the receiving countries? Don't we want to discuss this? I only took two or three of the basic objectives from this working document. It's a living, working document, but it's symbolic when people run away from it. And we should all, of course, work to the effect that we all gather around documents like this, the whole world, because we have to not only reinvent society in central Reykjavik, but also globally. Thank you very much.